EU Commissioner for Culture accuses Moscow of targeting Ukrainian heritage by damaging or destroying over 500 cultural sites in Ukraine.
At least 66 people were killed by Israeli airstrikes in Gaza, including 15 people queuing for nutritional supplements, most of whom were children. US President Donald Trump said that he would increase tariffs on neighbouring Canada to 35%.
A Russian drone attack on the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv hit a maternity ward on Friday, leaving at least 7 women and 3 newborns suffering from acute stress. Shards of glass littered the facility's floors after staff and patients fled the building. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky commented on the attack, emphasizing the importance of robust air defense capabilities. "There is no silence in Ukraine," wrote the leader on X, referring to an onslaught of Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities in recent weeks. In Odessa, 8 were injured as the Russian army attacked the city with drones. Russia has scaled up drone and missile attacks on Ukraine as Russian President Vladimir Putin evades calls for a US-backed ceasefire proposal. Trump said he would be making a major statement on Russia on Monday, although it's unclear what the statement will be about and whether it is designed to increase pressure on Moscow to agree to a ceasefire deal.
Churches, memorials and libraries. Russia has damaged or destroyed over 500 cultural sites in Ukraine, including 150 religious sites in 3 years of war, according to UNESCO. This includes the Transfiguration Cathedral in Odessa and the theater in Mariupol.
This is deliberate, this is coordinated, and this is strategic. Because our enemies, the aggressors, Russian aggressors, know that a nation is more than just territory. A nation is the people, it's the stories, it's the tradition, it's the values, it's their culture, which is why we must be strong on this point. We must continue to support our Ukrainian friends.
The protection of Ukraine's cultural heritage, threatened by 3 years of war, was at the heart of the Conference on the Reconstruction of Ukraine in Italy. The EU will dedicate a further €2 million to support Ukraine's cultural sector, bringing its contribution to €7 million this year and €48 million since the start of the war.
So the war in Ukraine, it's not just a war for territory. It's a war on values, it's a war on culture. And Ukrainian culture is part of European culture, which is why we must recognize its value and why we must protect it. We must look at what is happening in Ukraine, because whenever democracy is under attack, culture is always the primary target, which is why culture must be the primary defense as well.
The deliberate destruction of cultural heritage is a war crime according to the UN.
At least 66 people were killed by Israeli airstrikes in Gaza on Thursday, according to local health officials. This includes at least 15 people queuing for nutritional supplements in front of a clinic in central Gaza, the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital said. The aid group Project Hope, which runs the clinic, described the attack as a violation of international law. They said 10 children and 2 women were killed. The Israeli Defense Forces said it had struck a Hamas terrorist and that it regretted any harm to civilians. They added that the incident was under review. The attack comes as Israeli negotiators in Doha continue talks with Hamas on a ceasefire, the release of hostages, and the entry of humanitarian aid into the Palestinian territory. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also met with US President Donald Trump this week to discuss the possibility of a ceasefire and the situation in Gaza.
This is not a sign of power, it's a sign of guilt.
An independent UN investigator and outspoken critic of Israel's military operation in Gaza has said that it was shocking that the Trump administration imposed sanctions on her but stood by her view on the Gaza war. Francesca Albanese on Thursday in an interview said that the powerful were trying to silence her for speaking out for those with little to no power other than standing and hoping not to die. The U.S. announced the sanctions on Wednesday as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was visiting Washington to meet with President Donald Trump and other U.S. officials about reaching a ceasefire deal in the war in Gaza. Albanese is tasked with probing human rights abuses in the Palestinian territories and has been vocal about what she described as the genocide by the Israeli military in Gaza. Both Israel and the U.S. strongly deny the accusations.
US President Donald Trump said that he would increase tariffs on neighbouring Canada to 35%. He said these tariffs were aimed at pressuring Canada to curb fentanyl trafficking, despite limited evidence of significant flows, and to address what he described as unfair trade practices. The letter, addressed to Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, marks a sharp increase from the 25% tariffs which Trump imposed in March. Carney was elected to office in April on a platform of assertive foreign policy. Since then, he sought to distance Canada from the US while seeking to strengthen its ties with the European Union and the UK. Canada has previously responded to earlier tariffs with retaliatory measures and pushed back against Trump's repeated jabs, including that Canada could become the 51st US state.
Supporters of Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva on Thursday protested against US President Donald Trump and in favor of taxing the super-rich. Unions and social groups in Sao Paulo organized the protest as a call for confronting what organizers called an anti-people Congress. Brazilian President Lula da Silva had said that he would impose retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. if Trump follows through on a pledge to boost import taxes by 50% over the South American country's criminal trial against his predecessor, Jair Bolsonaro.
Demonstrators clashed with federal immigration officials carrying out a raid on a farm in Southern California. The raids took place on state-licensed marijuana nurseries in an agricultural farm. The agents were confronted with throngs of angry protesters who headed to the area after hearing word of the raids on social media. Authorities threw what appeared to be smoke canisters to disperse the crowd. The clashes come as immigration agents have ramped up arrests in Southern California and widespread rioting against the raids. Agents have taken to car washes, farms, and Home Depot parking lots to take people into custody, leading to widespread protests and stoking fear amongst immigrant communities. The death toll from flash floods in central Texas has climbed to 120. Rescue teams are now shifting from active search to recovery efforts. Among the victims are 3 friends celebrating the 4th of July, twin 8-year-old sisters at summer camp, and a 91-year-old grandmother. Crews have spent days combing through heavy piles of debris along the Guadalupe River, looking for remaining survivors.
With the 300 responders that we have working on the river today, they are going methodically from pile to pile and going through it to try to find everybody's loved ones. When I say piles, we're talking about debris piles 20, 30 feet high that are big enough to have a whole RV still in them and not be seen. That's a massive amount of debris that we're trying to clear, and we have heavy equipment working, and we're having to dig through it by hand as well. Just because the machines can go through it, we have to be very methodical about what we're doing.
The floods mark one of the first tests for the country's disaster relief agency under the Trump administration. Despite Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem tightening her grip on the agency, Trump has floated the idea of getting rid of it entirely.
This year marks the 30th anniversary of Srebrenica genocide and the first commemoration since the United Nations General Assembly declared an International Day of Remembrance. The resolutions condemns genocide denial and the glorification of war criminals. Today, a solemn ceremony was held at Srebrenica Potočari Memorial Center for 7 victims whose incomplete remains will be finally buried here. The youngest victims were just 19 years old. With them, the total number led to the rest has reached 6,751. Around 8,000 people joined the peace march, retracing the route thousands took in July 95, by thousands trying to reach safety in Tuzla or Kladanj. Ultramarathon runners, cyclists and motorcade riders also arrived here, carrying the same message, peace, and the promise that Srebrenica must never happen again. About 1,000 people are still missing. Elmina Čorbić, Euronews, Srebrenica.
Many people left Srebrenica from these platforms in search of a better life. 7 years ago, even the bus station was closed, but that didn't stop people from leaving, and they've left behind a place that they say hasn't changed in years. The town has no bakery, no kiosks, no butcher shops, and not a single craft store.
Šta će autobuska? Nema 300 ljudi u Srbiji. Šta će autobuska? Svi beže tamo u velike centre, znaš, u Sarajevo, Beograd, Zagreb.
Some believe external forces are at play in keeping the place they call home a ghost town.
Međutim, politika nije to uradila, nije dala do izražaja. Kad bi se narod ovdje pitao, vjerujte mi, Srbi i muslimani, drugačiji bi život bio. Ali politika neko radi ili nekom je možda u interesu da ovo ne radi.
Ljudi obični također se međusobno pomaže, pogotovo kad su neke nedaće u pitanju.
Life in Srebrenica hasn't ground to a complete halt, but it feels as if time has frozen. When you look around, you see the empty windowless buildings and the nearly deserted market carrying old and faded signs from another era.